Yeah.
But let's get into your professional life. And well, as you told that you don't have a business right now, well, except for the Rubik's Cube ring, but that's off the record. And how would you describe your future journey in business in less than 10 words?
That's something definitely you need to think about. So what I'll do is I'll speak my mind, and then we'll come up with a few words from there. Um, One thing I know for sure is in any journey, not just business, but in any journey, you are bound to start doing something first, and then failing in some ways, doing it again, and then succeeding. So like how we talked about failures and success before, you want to be doing this in loops. So it's not a linear cycle. It's a cycle. Um, so I would say do, fail, repeat, succeed, repeat. So that's like a for loop right there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so like a master perfecting his statue, just keep on working and keep on getting it wrong, and then learning from that, moving
Exactly.
moving forward.
Yeah. Because like I said before, like it's all about kind of knowing what doesn't work and what works. So
So yeah, so you say that success is part of, well, failure is part of success,
hmm
and so going back on that theme of success and failure, is there any time that in university or in school that you almost cold quits, you almost were gonna put down your tools and walk away, but you didn't, and why didn't you?
that's actually happened many times. And it's just again it's part of that phase that you go through. Um, so the first thing I can remember is when I was making that supersonic private jet back in Charterhouse. There was a time where everything was just breaking. So, for example, I had used a different material with another different material, and when I tried to combine them, it worked perfectly well. But after a few days, it just broke. And the same thing happened with the vertical stabilizers. They just fell apart, and I was just like, "This is not going great at all." And like at that time, nothing was going right. Like even in other subjects, and everyone was just kind of looking at me and going like, what is this guy doing and why is he doing this, like in a bad way, you know. So I was just kind of like, nope. And then I remember just lying down on my bed and I'm like, I've put in so much effort already into making this as good as I want it to be, and I'm just quitting. That's not great. I walked right away. I mean, I stood up from my bed and walked back into DT and just started working on it again. And look where that got me. So that's one. Secondly, I remember, in a place like Imperial. So what I thought of a university is different from what a university is. Um, and that's just me. That was just me being not so aware back then. But now I'm part of it. And so there have been certain times where, things get really difficult, especially at a place like Imperial. You have all these projects, you have all these deadlines, and on top of that, if you're doing some other stuff as well on the side, and those aren't going well either, and you're just like, well, why don't I just quit, But then there's another quote that I live by, and it is, when you feel like giving up, remember why you started in the first place. And it makes perfect sense because when we're so deep into working into something and we're just really intense and we're just really into it, we forget why we were doing it in the first place. And it's also to do with like the way we live currently is so fast paced that we forget to slow down and kind of appreciate our own journey. So then you ring that bell and you say, okay, well, why did I start doing this in the first place? And if you have a genuine reason and it was a good reason and you did it with love and you did it with passion and you did it with energy, tell me, I mean, I'm telling you right now, you're going to get back up on your feet. So yeah, it's because I look at myself and I look at, my future self of where I want to be as a 25, 30, 45, whatever. I look at him and I speak to him or potential him and I ask him, do you think I'm doing the right thing? And that's how you kind of reconfirm. And that really drives you to not quit and continue what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, well, I mean, that's quite inspiring. That's that you'd only, you'd find that you were near failure, you would almost quit, but getting back up on your feet, and thinking of why you're on this road anyways, and continuing with it is a real show of perseverance. That's not everyone you can find who is like that. But you mentioned talking to yourself in 30, 40 years, and as this podcast is called Clockmasters, we have several theoretical questions that we like to ask our guests to do with time. And let's just imagine that we invent a time machine, and
Yeah.
well, what would you like to say to 40-year-old you? If you could travel forward in time and ask him, what is he doing? Is he doing anything right?
So the reason why I love this question is because it actually relates to my everyday life. I am constantly in touch, or I try to be constantly in touch, with -5 and +5-year-old self. So I'm 20 right now, but I'm always in touch with my 15-year-old self, because that was a somebody. There was a certain thought process. There was a certain mindset in this person. And there's a 25-year-old you. And you're basically communicating both ways. So for example, when there will be times where you feel like you're useless. Let's face it, we've all been there. And it happens frequently sometimes, especially when things aren't going well. But then you kind of go back to your 15-year-old self, and then you ask him, yo, would you be happy if I was here where I am today? And in my case, yes. And again, I keep coming back to Naruto, but there's this one thing that Naruto has. He has an inner self. And so I got inspired by that, and I created this thing in my head where I'm standing right next to my 15-year-old self and my 25-year-old self. And when I ask my 15-year-old self this question and he says, yes, you're doing great, you give him a fist bump. And then you look at the 25-year-old self in cases where you're making a certain decision in life, or, whatever. And then you ask him, well, is this what you want to be doing? And then he says yes or no. So 40-year-old, the way I imagine myself as a 40-year-old is kind of like, okay, maybe a few gray hairs, maybe a really nice suit, maybe a really nice car. But more than that, it's an image of somebody who's very, like you said, perseverant, and is also on the way of becoming the symbol that people can look up to. So when you think of somebody that you want to be inspired by, who comes in your head? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like people who are older than me, but like they left a legacy rather than just a bunch of money. That's probably
exactly
my answer.
Exactly. So you want to be able to look at somebody not because they're rich or they're powerful, but because they're powerful. Does that make any sense? So when I say powerful, I don't mean like exactly. They're leaving this legacy, like you said. So what would you like to say to your 40-year-old self? Be kind, be loving, do things for a good purpose, do things for a greater cause. Because as much as a lot of people want to be doing things for themselves, for example, getting a good job or getting good money, etc., a lot of the times what happens is they still feel really empty, because either nobody can understand what they're doing or they aren't able to share it with somebody. And I think that's where, I just want to remind my 40-year-old self to keep doing that.
So there's like internal peace and internal, like ability to look back and, say that, I did a pretty good job, you changed people's lives. Is that what matters to 40-year-old you, making sure that you weren't living selfish and weren't, being selfish.
Exactly. Yeah, because I'm only 20 years old, so I haven't lived that long, but I have lived enough and helped enough to know that the amount of happiness it brings me is almost limitless. And isn't that what you want? So yeah.
This Well, on the theme of talking to people and leaving a legacy behind. Another question to do with our mystical time machine is dinner with any person, living or dead. Who would it be?
Can it be fictional, or does it have to be a really
Anybody.
a
It
real
can
person?
be
Anybody.
anybody. Absolutely anybody.
Okay, then take a guess. You know the answer.
I'm gonna flip a coin between Naruto and Iron Man. So
It's the first one.
would it be Naruto?
Yeah.
Would you like
Yeah.
to have a dinner with Naruto?
Absolutely. Because I think, like I said, so Iron Man was always obviously the reason why I started doing this engineering and design stuff, and looking up to him as like, oh my God, this is such a cool guy. I want to be a cool guy as well. That trace is there. But the moral values, we've all seen Iron Man, we've all seen the MCU. Let's face it, he has ego problems. He has certain qualities that people do not admire, if that makes sense. So I'm the kind of person who would like to take all the good from anybody I can. So obviously you take the good out of someone like Iron Man, but Naruto is this character that's like, he's just really bubbly in your everyday life, but then when the time comes, or when it needs to be, he's a boss man. And that's incredible how you can be these two things. Because most people think you can only be one of those. But no, it depends on the time. It depends on the situation. Times it depends on the kind of person you're dealing with. And that's something I'm still learning. Like I said, I'm only 20 years old. I've not lived long enough to be able to experience all of that. But he was this one. Do you know Naruto? Do you know his story?
No, please give me a 15-second recap, because
Sure.
I know there's about like infinite seasons, and but I know it's finished, so I'm not that clueless.
Okay. Great. It's basically a story about this one kid who's kind of lost. He doesn't have parents, and everybody just hates him, and he has no idea why. And it just turns out that there's a demonic fox that's sealed within him, and that. No, that's just the first episode, so that's fine. But like, everybody just hates him, and it's kind of this thing because he's different. He has no idea what's going on, and then he just looks at everybody. He's like, "I'm gonna prove you wrong. I'm gonna become Hokage,"
so he was Rocky before Rocky was Rocky. Oh no, wait, Rocky came out after him. As you can see, I am very, very knowledgeable in this in this sort of sense.
But yeah, that's why like I want to be able to speak to this person, because in a way, like you might be doing all these things every day, but there's no one around you that can kind of tell you, yo, you're doing the right thing. I'm very grateful. Like 2 or 3 days ago, when I went to give a talk somewhere, and I met this person who, and she's 70 something years old, but we were talking nonstop for hours, and it just felt really nice because she kept telling me that I'm on the right track because of what I want to do and the kind of things I want to do. Because she's like, you're right. A lot of people run after money, and and she herself is very rich, so she can actually say something like this. She said a lot of people do run after money, but most people that she has seen as well are kind of empty, And it's just great that she said that, because you can tell that she's not. She's been able to share. She's been able to have an impact on people, and she's a very influential person, by the way. And so it just feels nice to be able to. So that's why if I speak to Naruto, who is basically this person that I am trying to be like, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about, because I haven't seen Naruto, but I definitely really want to watch it now, because clearly sounds like a swell guy.
Oh, he's amazing. Like, yeah, he is amazing.
So, if you could go forward, in time again, and you've created a business, you've done everything right, and you would talk to yourself now, you asked the 40-year-old self what questions, and did he leave a legacy behind? But what would you think he would say to you?
So that's almost not almost, but like very similar to current me talking to my 15-year-old self. keep at it. And it's almost the same thing. So current me will tell my 40-year-old self, still be kind, still be passionate about stuff, still, do it for the greater good. And in the reverse, in a way, like, if potentially I am the 40-year-old that I think I will be, he would be looking back to the 20-year-old me and saying, yes, like, what you were thinking and the reasons why you wanted to do all these things for the greater good is good, because trust me, it works out in the end. Because this is exactly what I tell my 15-year-old self right now, and that is basically, I know it's scary because you're trying to create your own path and people are just calling you crazy, right? So looking back at my 15-year-old self, I'm going to say, I know it's scary, but it's happening for a reason. And that's because you will be able to appreciate it. It's the same thing. Like the reason why I wear this necklace right here, it's an arrowhead. And basically, it's to do with the fact that you're an arrow, you want to be shot forward, therefore you must be pulled back first. And so when you're pulled back and then you're shot forward, you actually appreciate it and you value it. Yeah.
So the metaphor of the arrow kind of has a big meaning in your life, being pulled back just to shoot forward and, prove people wrong.
Exactly, yeah. But for a good reason, not in a way that, I told you so. It's more of a self-development.
Without harm people, but
exactly.
So like an arrow that like hugs people rather than shoots them. Lovely.
Yeah, something like that.
So you say that you are an aeronautical engineering student in Imperial, and universities is one thing on paper, but from what I hear, they are very different from when you actually go to them. Would you say that Imperial is different to what it would be, and any difficulties or things that surprised you when you joined it?